But yesterday we learned about going to war. That's this week's Torah reading is Ki Tetzei Milchama, going out to war. It says going out to war is the reason, in a way, why we're here. We just finished learning in Likkutei Torah, and that we're here to make a war on nature and transform it to above nature. Nature doesn't want to be messed with, but especially our nature. But we have to make a war, right? So we make a war. We hinted at that last week also when we talked about putting judges in all of your gates, that you have to judge yourself and what's good, what's bad. Okay, so now in the time of exile, when we don't feel God, and it's not so clear what a Jew is, what's so special about being a Jew, so we have to make a war. Oh, says the Rebbe, a war. Says the Rebbe, but this war has to be dominated by peace. What does that mean? We can take a hint from this week's Torah portion. This Shabbat, we read in the daytime, in the morning prayer, we read about going to war. But in the afternoon prayer, there's also a short Torah reading, and there we read a few paragraphs of next week's Torah portion, one paragraph, next week's Torah portion. And there it talks about exactly the opposite. It talks about when you come to the land of Israel, the reward. The reward of all this work is going to be the future redemption. We're going to come to the land of Israel. Everything's going to be wonderful. It's going to be good. Okay, now the Torah is a workbook. The Torah is coming to tell us what we have to do. What we have to do. And as we've said so many times before, everything that's in the Torah is inside of us. But the main point of Judaism is to teach the world that the essence of man is responsibility. And we have free choice to do that responsibility or not. Or even more, to learn what that responsibility is. And then we decide whether we should do it or not. So it's choice, free choice. We have free choice to do our responsibility or to not to do our responsibility. But the goal of the whole business is, that's war. That's the war. The war is doing your duty, feeling your duty. I mean, there's a story I heard. We had in the yeshiva, there was a person, what was his name? He's from Chabad. He came years ago, 20 years ago, what was his name? Oh, you can't remember. Anyway, he had been a pilot in the Israeli army. Now, generally speaking, the pilots, especially the combat pilots, are very not religious, very anti-religious. Usually, they're like the elite, what they call the Israeli left, super elite. Those were like the founding fathers of Zionism, or the same thing. Superior people, they consider themselves to be very superior people, and in a lot of ways they are. They're very intelligent, they're very capable, they're very practical, and so in some ways they're superior to everybody. Anyway, so he said, now he became a religious, Jew. So how was it? So he said he walked down the street one day, and he saw a big picture of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in a window in Israel, and it was in a Chabad house. I guess they had rented out a storefront. And there was a sign, do your duty, put on tefillin. Do your duty. Now, he was a pilot, a fighter pilot, I don't know, but he was a pilot. And, a lot of these people in the Israeli army, especially, maybe they're very anti-religious, but a lot of them are just, really pure-hearted people. I mean, they really want to do good. That's why they went into the army. A lot of them, they're very, how do you say, pure what's a good word for it? The unassuming people. They want to do their duty. That's what they figure it is. And the religious people, they're just a bunch of parasites, and they don't work, and they don't fight, and they don't do anything. They just sit around and just eat and have children, and that's all they do. So they don't want to have anything to do with the religious people. So anyway, but in this way, his motivations for the whole business is pure. So he was walking down the street, and he saw this sign, "Do your duty," and he went inside, and he said, "What type of a duty? I do my duty. My whole life is just doing my duty. I'm risking my life to do what I'm supposed to do, my responsibility, as a human being." So they said, "Well, that's really wonderful, and we really, admire you for that, and we really, there's another duty, and do your duty to the Creator of the universe. Do your duty. What do I get out of it? You do your duty. That's what you get out of it. What do you get out of being in the army, and you're just risking your life over there? What do you get out of it? You get out of it a feeling that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do." So I said, "Okay." So he put on tefillin, and then from then on, he got more and more interested in it, and became a religious Jew. And so in other words, not because of what he would receive, that didn't appeal to him at all. He did it for what he was going to give. He wanted to be connected to some necessity that was greater than himself. So that's what the essence of the Jews are. So we don't think about reward. That's what Abraham didn't think about reward, not going to heaven, not going to hell. Who cares about that stuff? We're doing only what God wants us to do. Why? Because that's what God wants us to do. I mean, there's no greater pleasure than to be connected with the Creator, doing what God wants. I mean, God gives us everything for free. At least do something for Him for free. Everything we got. Everything we've got is a gift. So give Him a gift. So says the Rebbe, if so, then it's not exactly so understood. What is the message of the portion of the Torah that we read on Mincha, Ki Tavo La'oretz? That's the reward. We're doing everything for a reward. I thought we weren't doing it for a reward. We're just doing it for responsibility. And all of a sudden, here we have a whole Torah portion that said, no, you're going to come to the land of Israel, and it's going to be good, it's going to be wonderful. And that's the goal. That's what you want. That's going to be your big reward. Oh, so there is a reward. We're dangling a little carrot in front of the goat, right? And that's what's going to, okay. So says the Rebbe, one second. Where did we get up to last time? I think we got up to 1 second. Let me see where this is. We did this. Oh. Okay, so we're in this world, and after we leave the world, or after whatever, we're going to get a reward. So the reward is dangling in front of that's our motivation, right? It says, oh, come on, I thought we were doing it just for the sake of God. It says, the point is like this. The beginning of the reading in Parshas Ki Tavo, that's what we're going to read next week. After we read Ki Teisei, this week's Torah portion, which means going out to war, and next week is talking about the reward. So it says, the fact is, this reward, this is an explanation and elucidation. Is that a good word? An explanation, giving the details of Parshas Ki Titza, of going out to war. Shagam Avoda, also the service of when you do make a war, nowadays you have to fight against all of your urges, force yourself to do good and to turn from bad. That's called going out to war. So it has to be in a way of menucha v'tyashvut. When you make this war, it has to be in a way of being calm, as though you've already got the reward before you started the battle. Okay. What's the reward? You're going to come to the land of Israel. You're going to inherit it. All the Jews will be Moshiach, and even more. So everything you do now should be permeated with this feeling of what the reward is. And what's the reward? That you won't have any problems. And we'll see. Shekalalas avoda, the general service, yeshnu kavar me'ayin v'dugmas heitchalet mamad u'matzav d'schar. That all of the service of God that you do now, when you're fighting against your evil impulses and your selfish desires and your addictions and your aggressions and your depressions and this, you're fighting against these things. It should be in a way of easy, calm. The Rebbe once said to somebody, you have to be in simcha b'tuv levav. You have to be happy with a good heart. And the Rebbe said, you know what that means? The Rebbe said to someone, take it easy. Take it easy. Don't be uptight. The reward is certain to come. Like it says in Pirkei Avot, you should know that the reward for the righteous people is in the future. The Yesh Lomar, we can say, Pirush was, let me close the door also. Yesh Lomar, we can say, Pirush was, the explanation is that the service itself is mitochit kashrut vitchavrut. Says da, you should know. Now the word da is also you should know. In English also says that in the beginning of creation, that it says that man, Adam, knew his wife and they had children. So knew means that they had marital relations. And so what does it mean? You should know. So it says the word to know, that is also one of the 10 sfirot. That means connection. That means to connect to something in a real way that gives birth to something real. So that's the word that's used for sexual relations, but it's also a word which is used for realization. When you realize something, it becomes real. You become attached to it. It's real. It says that is the language of hitkashrut, being attached, vitchabrut, and joined. Means that you should know that the reward for the tzaddikim is going to come. It's going to be. It's not now. What does it mean? You should know. You should know means that it is now. You should be attached to it. It should be real. You should be attached to im amamad v'matzav the scharon shel tzaddikim latav lavot. You should always be attached to this awareness that the reward, namely Moshiach and Geula, you're attached to it. Haynu shebizman avoda, even now, in the time when you're serving God, hayom lasotam, now to do the commandments and not to receive reward. But nevertheless, even now, yeshno me'en, there's something like the reward that we're going to get in the future. And what is the reward that we're going to get in the future? Revealed godliness in this physical world, building the holy temple. All of the Jews will want to do all the commandments. That'll draw them to the land of Israel. We should feel that that's present right now. How so? We can say this is also hinted at in Parshas Kitetse itself. Shabbat, that in this week's Torah portion, there's a commandment that you have to give the wages immediately. Ba'ofen b'yomo titen scharo. If your worker is working regularly, you didn't make any conditions, right? You have to pay him every day. If he knows the conditions are, you pay him once a week, you pay him once a month, then it's okay. But if there's no conditions, then you're supposed to pay b'yomo titen scharo. You're supposed to not delay his wage. You have to give it every day. Moving from this, it's also understood what's relevant to giving the reward, giving the wages, the service of the Jewish people, al yadei, by means of God. We're serving God. We're not doing it for any wages. Well, fact is, God pays. But dugmas balabai is just like a house. What do you say? The manager, shesocher polim, the house owner, that he rents out workers to work for him. Says who God is your boss, and he will pay you what he owes you. And in the Torah it says you have to pay immediately. Kolosha and a Mishnah, like it says in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, this Shabbat, it says Matan, you should know the reward of the tzaddikim is latid lavo. You have to know, what does it mean? Lamacha lekabel schar. It says you receive, now you have to work. Tomorrow you receive the reward. You receive the reward. It says, what does it mean? Torah leomer, we have to say that there's also the reward that has to be given today. says, one second, everything that says in the Torah, God does. If it says in the Torah that the manager, the boss, has to pay his workers on that day, so it must be that God does it also. But it says in Pirkei Avot that we don't get a reward today. It says it's going to be only in the future, lati level. So how can it possibly be? So it says we can have both of them. That we can get the reward today, namely the revelation of godliness and Moshiach right now, but really it's going to come only in the future. How is this going to be together? We'll see. Yuvan Behektam, we can understand what it says in this week's Torah portion, when you go out to war on your enemy. Kapirish Rashi, like Rashi said, this is talking about an optional war. When you go out to war, an optional war. Okay, there are mandatory wars that you have to fight, and then there's optional wars. Optional wars. What's an optional war? Very strange. I mean, to tell you the truth, I don't 100% understand it, but nevertheless, it's a commandment. This is a commandment. The Jewish people are allowed, they're allowed to make a war to widen their borders, to conquer lands. They can conquer their enemies, even though they're not commanded to do it. They're not commanded to, but if they want to, they're given permission. It's optional. It's optional. And so this is not a command. You don't have to go and conquer the lands that are around you. There are going to be lands that Moshiach is going to give to us, right? He's going to come and he's going to give us lands. There's 3 big lands that we're supposed to get. I guess we'll get all of Lebanon and Jordan and everything. That's not our business. It says that even that won't be through a normal war, that these nations will willfully and happily want to be under the rulership of the Jews, the God's chosen people. They want to. But there's also a thing that they can conquer lands. They can conquer, they can make war, right? What do they call it? A pro-action or something like that. Anyway, they can declare war on neighboring countries just to increase the riches of the Jewish people. That's what's called an optional war. An optional war. Okay. So it says that's what this week's Torah portion is talking about. When you go out to war, it's talking about an optional war. Milchemet Reshut. Like I said before, when you go out. So again, God permits there to be this optional war. This sense that the whole idea of Kalalat Adam Ba'olam, general service of man in the world. The whole world is a big war. How can we say, if so, how can we say that this week's Torah portion is talking about an optional war? I thought the war we're talking about is an obligation. The soul comes into the world in order to serve God and to transform the world. That's not optional. That's mandatory. The soul comes, a Jew. It's mandatory that you follow the laws of the Torah. The laws of the Torah are designed for only one thing: refining the world. You do what God says in the world. That makes the world an ideal place. That's what Adam was supposed to have done. That's how we're fixing it up by doing this. So that's mandatory. You have to do the laws of the Torah. You're a Jew. You just have to do the laws of the Torah, right? That's an obligation for every Jew. That's the war we're sent out into the world to do. And so the Rebbe says, but here it says, it's talking about an optional war. An optional war, Reshut. One second, this that we have to work in the world, this is optional? We don't have to do it if we don't want to? Or is it mandatory that we have to do it? Says the Rebbe, here it says, going out to war is optional. You don't have to do it. There's no commandment or any obligation to go out to war, unless the Jewish people want to do it. Hooray, if so, going out to war of refining the body and the animal soul and the world around us is a commandment. It's not optional, it's a commandment. What are you telling me to tell me it's a... Oh, now we got a big problem. The Torah is telling us it's not. You want to be a religious Jew? Be. You don't want to be? That's okay. That's okay. It's optional. Or are we saying no? Of course it's optional. Of course it's an obligation. Right? It's an obligation. We have to serve the Creator. Oh, you have to serve the Creator, right? It says no. It says you don't have to. That's an optional war. It's your option. You can do what you want. So serving God, is it are we doing the Torah because we have to do it? Or are we doing the Torah because take it or leave it? Right? We decided. Or maybe in a more simple language, who's the boss over here? God is the boss or I'm the boss? Right? God is commanding us to be in the world, or I decide if I want to, I'll do it. When we said boy, so there's another question regarding to the payment. The payment. Schar, when does a person get paid? He gets paid only if he does something that's optional. He doesn't have to do. A person that's a slave or whatever, he doesn't get paid. Schar is relevant only to when a person, he rents himself out. He accepts the job to serve the boss Tumurat schar for a wage. Kivan shalula izod, if it wasn't for his decision, ein alav chiyuv lavod at the balabayat. And if he's not going to receive a reward, he's not going to serve the boss. Which is not the case in a servant, shekana l'rabo, that he's purchased, the chayav l'shamash rabo, he has to serve his master. No shayach schar, it's not relevant to reward. It used to be, in the time, this doesn't exist anymore, but it used to be that a Jew, if he got into deep debts, as he could sell himself. He could sell himself to be a servant. Or if he was caught stealing and he can't make reparations, so the court could sell him. There's differences between the court to sell. Nevertheless, if a person becomes a servant, he doesn't get a reward. The master has to treat him well. He has to feed him and clothe him. And if he has a family, he has to provide for his family. It says that in some ways that the servant gets treated better than the master does. But the servant cannot demand a payment. Okay, end of the week, let's have my $100. There's no such thing. Right? A slave, a servant has to serve. He's got no choice. He has to show. So a servant, if he has to do it, it's mandatory. So he doesn't receive a reward. Doesn't receive a reward. Since the Jewish people, we are obligated to serve God, and we are like a servant, like we said, Li Bnei Yisrael Avadim. To me, the Jewish people are servants. But and even more, Yoter Michi of the Eved, we're more servants. Jewish people are even more than just a regular servant. Why? Ani lo nivresi, I was only created to serve my creator. A servant, at least he's separate from the master. We're not even separate. If so, since we're obligated to serve, and we are servants of God against our will, so what's the idea of getting paid? God says, I'm going to give you reward. The reward is going to come in the future. That's the reward you're going to get. But I thought we were servants. We're servants. A servant serves as an obligation. It's not an option. So a servant doesn't get paid. A reward is only given if you choose to work. Like we said here before, you're going for an optional war, and not on that's a chov. It's not an obligation. So it doesn't make sense. What's the Rebbe saying? Every Jew is obligated to do Torah and mitzvahs, and we are promised we'll get a reward. The reward is the coming of the Moshiach and the revelation of God in the world. Says the Rebbe, but that doesn't make any sense. Why? Because we're serving God, we're obligated to serve God. A Jew is supposed to serve. If you don't serve God, that's not good. You're a servant. We're servants. The Jewish people are avadai. They're the servants of God. So how can we demand a reward? Doesn't make any sense. And not only that, this week's Torah portion says that the war of the Jewish soul that comes to refine the world, and that we're in the world to refine it, to purify it, our body, our animal soul, to refine it, that's an optional war. It's optional. The whole thing is optional. So what? It's optional to work on yourself, right? If you decide you don't want to keep Shabbos, then no, it's my option, up to me. Right? I can do it. But if I do serve God of my own free will, then I get a reward. So we deserve a reward, but that implies that what we're doing is optional. And it's not optional, it's an obligation. What's going on over here? We can see the explanations like this. You have to go out. What does it mean? Avodat Adam, the service of man in the world, is in a way of yitzia. You have to go out. You have to go out from your true place. You have to go out from your true place, from being connected to God. Lo rach biyachas la'amidat haneshama, not just regarding the soul in the world of Atzilut, the way the soul was before it came into the world. Neshama, the soul, like we say every morning, the soul that you put into me. When you wake up in the morning, and one of the first things you say is, Neshama shenastatabi, the soul that you put into me, God, tahorahi, it is pure. And that's talking about the soul, how it is in this dimension of reality, which is called Atzilut. But even more, in regard to something much higher than Atzilut, in its source, Rishon, the Jewish people are totally one with God. Atzilut is just a level of revelation of godliness. The Jewish soul is in the essence of God, above the whole entire idea of creation, including also higher than what's called the tzimtzum, the first tzimtzum. Okay, these are deep ideas, and I'll explain it to you in just one moment. But suffice it to say right now that God is creating the world, but it's a very tremendously complicated process by which that God does not reveal himself in the world. How it can be that God is creating everything all the time, and there is nothing except for God, because all the creation is being created from nothing. So if so, the really creation is really nothing. All there really is God. Why don't we see it? Why don't we feel it? It says not only we don't see it, we don't feel it. Even the angels don't see it, they don't feel it. They feel it a little bit more than we do. But not why? Why is it we don't see God? It says not only we don't see God, we have absolutely no idea. It's impossible to have any idea what God is. There's no conception. God can only be grasped, it says, with faith, with the arousal of the heart. My heart tells me. But what God is, that God is creating us, we can't understand this. But on the other hand, here we are. God is creating us. I mean, we're here. And there's nothing except for God. It's not that God is really very far away, or that God created us like 1 billion years ago or 5,000 years ago, and he just let it go. Chassidut tells us no, that God is creating it every moment. If so, why don't we feel God? So it says that God, there's this process, and this was revealed by the Arizal 400 years ago. There's this process that God does, which is called the tzimtzum. And the tzimtzum means there's a very drastic removal of God's presence. God, so to speak, contracted his presence. Some people say he contracted himself. God did not contract himself. He did not contract his light, but he contracted his presence. Whatever that means, I don't know. But what it does mean is that we don't know. We have absolutely no way of understanding what reality is. But we're partaking of it, and what we do is very important to God. It says that's why is it important to God, because the Jewish soul comes from the essence of God. Shahari machshavtan shel Yisrael, the thought of the Jewish people was before anything. It was before the tzimtzum, before everything. Ubahemet, in the Jewish people, God consulted when he created the world, like the rabbis say, but min nimlach, who did God consult with to make the world b'nishmateim shel tzadikim, with the souls of the Jewish people? If so, the Jewish people, they are a chelik elokam yimal mamash. You want to know what God looks like? Look at the Jewish people. How is that? I mean, the Jewish people look like everybody else. Right? Yeah, that's true. But there's some aspects of the Jewish people which are totally incomprehensible. Totally incomprehensible. One of them is how they keep existing. How they're here. Everybody hates them. Why are they here? And why do they insist that it really happened, that God spoke to them on Mount Sinai and that God took them out of Egypt? That God, no other religion claims a thing like that. Where did they get that from? Right? And they all believe it. Even the simplest Jews and the most complicated Jews. So there's certain things about the Jewish people that indicate that there's something in this world that's really, really, really important, much more important than heaven. Much more important. Now, heaven you don't understand. No one can understand what heaven is. Heaven is incomprehensible. No one knows what heaven is. What's heaven? No one knows. And there's different levels of heaven. So there's all these different levels of things that you cannot possibly, it's not even the realm of understanding. It says that the soul, after it goes out from the body, a person dies, then he has a little more comprehension. Then there's a certain type of understanding of the upper worlds. It says that the pleasure of the upper worlds comes from the understanding. But God himself, so he says the Jewish people, that's where the Jewish people come from the essence of God. The Jewish people they have a portion of God from above, mamash, means the essence of God, mimal, and mamash, physical, in this world. Metziut achad im mahuto v'atzmuto. The Jewish people are one with God's essence. Jews and God are one. So this sounds a bit chauvinistic, and it is, but that's the way God created the world. What do you want? That's it. That's it. Oh, 1 second. Where are we going? What happened? What happened? Yes. Okay. We can also add that this is what's hinted at later on in our Torah portion. This is what we learned yesterday. Remember, Lo ava Hashem Elokecha, that God did not want to listen to Bilam. Why? Ki ahevecha Hashem Elokecha, because God loves you. Kamavur, like it's explained in Likkutei Torah. We learned that yesterday. Havaya Elokecha, that God is your power. He's your life. Shebakol nefesh Yisrael, that in every single Jewish soul there is this level, and how much more so there is a ray from the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the essence of God, really, especially the letter Yud. Like it says, Chelek Hashem Amo, a portion of God is His people. Yaakov Chevel Nachalato, Jacob is a portion of God's inheritance. She'em Chelek, they are a Chelek, a portion. The Jewish people are a part, ve'ora, an array from the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, from the essence name of God. The lo ra kavaya, not just the name of God is relating to the creation, elagam havaya shebamatzo, but the name of God in God's essence. The lo rak dalet osos, not just the 4 letters of God's name, but also the point of the Yud, which is above the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, above God's name. The letter Yud has a little point on it, on the top. Right? The Ad, until the Bechin is the lowest rum, is the level of godliness, which is not hinted at any letter or even any point. That's where the Jews come from. So now we can understand what it means when you go out to a war. This is talking about optional war. Why is it optional? Because the Jews are part of God, and God is not forced to do anything. God didn't have to create the world. And because the Jewish people are one, totally one with the essence of God, Yisrael, the Jews and God are one. If so, Jews are totally above any connection to the world and serving in the world. And their descent into the world, the fact that the Jewish soul comes into the world to purify the world, and that's an obligation. You do the Torah, it's an obligation. It says not, it's not an obligation. The Jewish soul comes into the world for the same reason that God creates the world and God puts it. What does it mean? It's God's option. Everything by God is optional. God is not forced to do anything. And the Jewish people are a part of the essence of God, so it can't be the Jewish people are forced to do anything. If so, the fact that the Jewish people are in the world and that they have to do the Torah and they're obligated to fix up the world, this is all optional by the Jews. They don't have to do it. They didn't have to put themselves into this obligation. The Jews went out, the Jews went out from their true place, as they are one with God, in order to refine the world. This is after they came in, after the world was created, and the world was created with their. What happened? Oh, the world was created, so to speak, with the permission of the Jewish people. The Jewish people and God are one. Now, we're not talking about the Jewish people as you see them, the external part of, right, the Jews that are sitting in the Knesset or whatever, the scientists. We're talking about the essence of the Jewish soul. The essence of the Jewish soul. That part of a Jew which does not allow him to deny his Judaism as much as he would want to. Are you a Jew? My parents were Jewish. I'm not. Right? Is not able to deny his Judaism. They try, and the Zionists really tried to deny their Judaism. Israelis for a while. It doesn't happen anymore. It used to be. You asked, I want to put on tefillin. I'm not a Jew. Americans will never say it. Leave me alone. They'll say, leave me alone. None of your business, right? The Israelis will say, I'm not a Jew. That doesn't exist anymore. I go out regularly and I've asked people to put on tefillin every day. I haven't heard that for years and years and years. It used to be 30 years ago, you heard it regularly. I'm not a Jew. But that doesn't exist anymore. And even those people, after they say it, they'll laugh. It doesn't feel, that's the essence of a Jew. He cannot deny that he's a Jew. Why not? He doesn't even know what a Jew is. He doesn't even know what it is. It's a negative thing to him. All this Torah and commandments and religion and stuff. What's going on? Says the fact of the matter is that the Jewish soul, the essence, Jewish identity is one with God, the Creator, the reason for creation. That's the way God created the world. What do you want? That's what it says in the Torah 2, 3 times. How many times it says? The Jews are the chosen people. Everybody knows it. That with the Jewish people, God consulted to create the world. And therefore, the coming down into the world is in a way of milchemat hareshut, is in a way of option. But another way of saying it, we can say that because of the existence of the Jews, how they are in the world, the sole service of the Jews is an obligation. They have to serve God. They have to do the Torah. You're a Jew. I was created in order to serve God. But from the essence, the true essence of what the Jew is, which is above the world, that's the kitetse. The Jews have to go out to fight. Briotam, their existence in the world is after they went out from their true place, which is above the whole entire creation, to the degree, ad kedei kach, sheba'em hayata, that was, God consulted to create the world. That's what it says. Avodatam hi ba'avoda shel reshut. If so, from the essence, the service of the Jewish people in the world, this is optional. The milchemat reshut, that's an optional war. According to this, now we can understand the whole idea of getting a reward. Why should we get a reward? Because we're serving God, not because we have to. That's the external part of us. We're serving God because from our essence, we're not even aware of this. Our essence, it's optional. We decided to do it. It's all up to us. She'enu shayach, it's not relevant. Therefore, we deserve a reward. We made a choice. We didn't have to serve God. Since the true essence of what a Jew is, which is above the world, coming down into the world, this is really in a way of optional. It's of their own free volition to come down and serve the world. And we're going to talk about this, God willing, tomorrow. But we see that from the essence of the Jewish soul, nothing can touch it. It's totally above the world. And that it serves God in the world is totally from its free will. It's the decision of the soul, but in the essence of the soul, to be in the world and to serve God. But it's a decision. It didn't have to make that decision, so to speak. And therefore, we get a reward. That's where the reward comes from, that we didn't have to decide. And the reward is the Moshiach and Geula, as we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Okay, let's just do one more here.